The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling by.
Top of the day, I'm Joe Doolittle.
And I'm Kate Dudding.
And this is Story by Story.
Celebrating the human spirit.
And we come to you on behalf of about 50 members of the Story Circle of the Capital District, which is a guild of storytellers who perform and study and learn and generally make themselves available here in upstate New York and in New England. And it's pleased to be here once again.
Yes, indeed.
And it's summertime, and the world has turned verdant and green. And I love that, except I always know when the pollen is coming off the little cottonwood trees in the neighborhood. Not only does it screw up my driveway, but I can't really, I sneeze all the time. So I hope you're having a better day than that. What's the most interesting thing that you've been doing or seeing in storytelling for the last month, Kate?
Well, last time on the show, I told my new story about Where Am I From?, which was how, through my DNA analysis through the National Geographic Genographic Project, I found I have ancestors from 4 continents: Africa, Asia, Europe, and North America. And I have ancestors from the Muslim, Jewish, and Christian traditions.
I thank you for bringing that up again, because I said to myself, I got to get my DNA tested so that I would know, because we could be cousins, you know that?
We could indeed.
We probably are.
And yesterday, one of my Facebook friends, I just got the full impact of us being cousins. Moving right along. Yesterday, one of my Facebook friends posted a video that was done in Europe of about 60 people in a room that had their DNA analyzed. And first, before they got their results, they told individual little interviews of what they thought their background was. And then the interviewer said, "And are there any nationalities you really don't like?" And one, I think the fellow from Iceland said, "Oh, I don't like Germans." Ooh. And somebody else said, "Oh, I don't like the French." And so then they got their analysis and they read 31% German or 25% French. They went, "Oh my goodness." So my story ends with, I believe that if anybody had their DNA analysis done, they too would find themselves that they were from ancestors from several continents and several religious traditions. And this video is evidence that my guess was correct.
Yeah, well,
we are the world.
That's really wonderful. I've got a variation on that story with one of the things that happened just the night before last at Arthur's. We had our open mic with Reggie Harris there, and Reggie Harris, and I mentioned this last month, but Reggie Harris is a very well-known African-American folk singer who performs with his wife, Kim. And we have a series going on Stories for Racial Healing, and so he kind of sent me an email, said, "I got to get involved in this." And the quickest way to get involved was just to come up and do Arthur's. And we had a full house. He was a draw. And he told stories and songs, but the story that he told involved a story that's developed over the last 15 years that involves both sides of the plantation family that Reggie's from. His white family cousins and his black family cousins. And it's a fascinating, powerful story about what we mean by being related. And it ends on a very positive note. We hope to have him around sometime over the next year so that you might be able to come here. Because the music and the stories are just powerful and refreshing on this issue of racism, and I was so touched that it's still with me. You can kind of sense that. So that's what
And
happened.
today is Thursday, and that happened.
That happened Tuesday, yeah. So we've had some, and these stories that we're telling about the stories are important for you to understand as an audience, because stories in effect both entertain us and teach us things. So you learn from something like the DNA story and the Icelanders comment, and you learn from what people say about Reggie's story. And that's part of the magic of storytelling, because people's minds and hearts get engaged in a way they don't when maybe they're looking at TV or a movie, or a good book might do it. But,
I think I mentioned this on a previous show, but a story that has stayed with me since probably '95 was an African-American fellow that I worked with said, I was on vacation in New Hampshire on the seashore there, and I went into one of the tourist shops. And as I was going in, a woman came out and said, "I'll be right back." When I went in, I realized I was the only one in the store, and that she had to be the clerk on duty in the store. And he said, "I've never forgotten that, because in Schenectady, when I walk into a store, I get followed around." And here she was, leaving the whole store open for me.
right. Right.
And I thought, oh my God, what a burden he lives with on a daily basis, having people visibly distrust him.
Well, you can sense that there's a pretty wide dimension to stories, from what we know as some of the old Greek myths to fables to current stories to kids' stories. But a lot of the themes are somewhat the same, and that's also helpful in terms of listening. But it's maybe helpful for your own references as perhaps you create a story. And later we'll talk about some of our open mics that we have locally and story circle meetings, where if you're interested in coming and learning a little bit more about storytelling, or maybe trying to tell a story or telling a story, we'd love to see you. Although I think maybe we ought to hear some stories.
And perhaps you people have heard some extraneous giggles that have not been coming from Joe and me. So we do have some guests in our studio today.
I just want it on the record that I don't giggle extraneously. I just wanted to throw that away. Our guests are Jerry Burns and Barry Marshall, and they have been a profound influence on storytelling here in upstate New York, and actually around the country and maybe overseas. They look a lot younger than they are, because they say they've been together 25 years. And I've been privileged to be part of audiences and performances where they have brought their skill and their art and some of their magic to the event in the evening. We are so glad you guys are all the way up here from Columbia County to share some time with us. And
their stage name is the Storycrafters.
That's true. And they have a website and everything like that.
Storycrafters.com.
Right, they do. But you guys, you've been telling stories for more than the time you've been together, but you've been together telling stories for a long time. And how did this all start?
Well, consciously, I started telling stories. I was the first one of the two of us that decided storytelling is what I want to do. It was when I was in college that I found out about it, right at the end of my nefarious career in college, and this almost finished and really not quite sure what I was going to do, when I just happened upon a class where storytelling was part of it, and it took me the telling of two stories in front of an assembly of kids in school that I said, oh, that's it, that's what I want to do, and it just went from there. So that was around 1985, and Jerry and I met about 5 years later. So I'd already been consciously working toward the art form and thinking that's really what I want to do, and just working away at it. And then when we met and Jerry asked me what I was doing, and I was a storyteller, well, she got interested, and then that was where your part of the story comes in.
Right, well, and actually, where Barry was consciously trying to be a storyteller, I was unconsciously a storyteller, which is how I do a lot of things, just backwards and by instinct.
You've been unconscious about storytelling for a long time? Is that what we're saying here? Sorry, I didn't expect that. Did you expect that? No.
Well, the extraneous giggles.
Oh, I should have told you.
There's definitely an intuitive side to my approach to the world, and so I was actually finishing in the process of getting my PhD in social welfare at the time, and was teaching as my assistantship. And I had it was a freshly developed MSW. It was just barely warm on the paper when they said, "You're teaching," and I said, "I can't teach. I don't know what I'm doing." And they said, "You're teaching," and so I ended up teaching, and I didn't know how to teach, so I insisted on having a mentor. But the thing that I found to teach was to tell stories. I didn't know it was called telling stories. I just thought this was effective teaching. That was just how I worked it. And then we met, and when we started telling stories, it was like something clicked really quickly.
Well, yeah, you just picked it up really fast. It was like automatic for you.
Right, because I'd been doing it, but it wasn't consciously doing it. And it wasn't until years later that we realized that I had been doing storytelling all along, and I wasn't a brand new storyteller the first time we ever told a story together.
A natural raconteur.
Oh, hell.
Well, that'll work.
It was coming off of the teaching, really.
Yeah. Well, the applied storytelling.
Exactly. Sure. And applied storytelling is really a lot of our heartbeat. Like we both firmly believe in that, and we've done a lot of training in applied storytelling. In fact, I'm on the cusp right now of going into a week-long sequestration with public defenders in applied storytelling. It's going to happen I leave tomorrow or the next day.
So you're actually going to be working with attorneys on storytelling that makes their presentations in court
more effective.
They're telling their clients' stories to the jury and the judge.
Exactly. Yep. Trial skills program and
Do the opposing lawyers, do the district attorneys hire you to have them teach the story too, or are you? Because some lawyers will only work on the defense, and some lawyers only work on the offense. So you're a defensive lawyer, or a defensive storyteller.
Well, yes, I'm very much on the defensive. Yeah. No, it actually works well. I mean, it's public defenders. I'm a social worker. It's a nice little marriage there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a fascinating, and that came out of just your reputation as storytellers, and somebody recognized that there was an application there, or did you guys seek it out as a job, or how did that fit?
It came more at Jerry than Jerry going after it.
Okay.
There were a couple of different organizations that she worked with, and then this one really became the place that was hers, that she works for, which is out of the Capital District.
It's a great story, because when you say the application of stories, that's a different connotation than performance per se, right?
Yeah, exactly. Applied storytelling is when people in their professional or regular day-to-day lives use storytelling to do all the things that you guys were just talking about before. To remember important events, to promote diversity, to be conscious, to do healing. There's so many ways that people, professionals and regular everyday people, use stories.
We've done a variety of things with that. We worked at a college down in Connecticut for a number of years teaching school librarians and teachers applied storytelling, getting them learning to tell stories and then figuring out ways to apply it to their curriculum. So that was another thing that we did for a while.
And good for you.
And a way that we use storytelling in an applied way is when we teach, like anytime we teach, but also when we work with psychiatric patients. We have a regular commitment where we work with inpatients at a hospital, and we're doing healing storytelling with them. We are still developing ways to teach others how to do it, but we have to do it ourselves and really understand it from being inside that role before we're going to tell other people how to go about doing it themselves. But we've been doing that for a while now, right?
It's coming up on 4. We're in our 4th year of doing that now.
It's wonderful. The most satisfying work. Oh my!
Let's talk a little bit about that. In that setting, you're a regular on the therapeutic team. You arrive and you got a group of patients?
What happens is we get to the hospital, we go there once a month, and we go in, we get there about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on traffic in Stamford, Connecticut, but about 15 to 20 minutes before the session's supposed to start, and we meet with a couple of the staff members of the psychiatric unit, and they tell us who's there, what are the issues that are going on, what was discussed in group that morning, what issues came up during group, and we have a list of stories, and then we just pick and choose the ones based on the things they've told us as to who's there and what were the conversations that morning in the group, and we'll just aim our language to focus a little bit on the things that have been going on in the hospital right at that time with that group of patients, and then we see where the conversation goes. And some months we'll spend the whole time telling stories because the patients won't be very talkative, and so they'll just be listening. And then other months we'll tell a story and the conversation just erupts, and we get through in an hour-long session, we get through maybe a couple of stories because everybody has things to say, and sometimes the patients have stories to tell. It really varies a lot as to what's going to happen.
Okay, so the kind of story you're telling in this setting are folk tales?
They're still folk tales.
Yeah.
Yeah, we work with traditional stories purposely. We've done a little bit with personal storytelling, but we find that the traditional stories are ones that they want to sometimes go after. See, here's the trick about a personal story, like when we've done that, they can't go and find it, but there are many times that people say, how do I find that story that you told? I mean, sometimes they'll remember them, but sometimes they want access to it later. Okay. And so we find that doing stories that are accessible outside in the world, something that they can find on the internet or in a library, are really functional, because then they can really carry them forth.
So even these old traditional stories, they relate to.
Oh, absolutely.
And it becomes safe for them, because what we're doing is we're talking about fictional characters, you know.
Maybe even animals, who knows?
Right, and so all of a sudden it becomes safe for them to say, oh yeah, I get that, and then it opens them up to talk, because they spend so much time in the psychiatric unit talking about what's going on with them, and it becomes very loaded. So by us saying, well yeah, there was this man sitting in the middle of a field and blah 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 blah, and then we're off into a story, and then the issue gets pointed at, but we're not pointing at the patients, and so all of a sudden they can go, oh yeah, look at that guy right there, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going
Or
through.
Hansel and Gretel's father who abandoned them in the woods.
Zoom.
Right.
That's a much safer territory.
Right into it, and
Exactly.
so it becomes a really fabulous situation for them to get open and talk, because they don't realize that we're talking about them.
And the other thing about it is that we can, one way when we introduce it, or somewhere along the way in the session, we tell them that, you know, these are stories that have lived for millennia. These have carried people, and the way we put it is that these have been signposts and guiding lights for cultures over the course of a long time, helping people to live life. These problems, these issues, these challenges that human beings face are not unique. They're everybody's, and so we can take something, even if it's just a grain, even if it's just a hair of wisdom out of some of those stories, and then carry them into life.
Yeah, I like to tell people that if these stories hadn't been relevant to each generation, we wouldn't know them now.
Yes.
That it was passed on.
Yep, exactly. They were saved for a reason. Exactly.
Just one other thought that came to my mind as I was listening. Metaphors are important, and we think about metaphor in the novel sense, you know, where you're making an example, but a traditional folk story is metaphor. And in the old Greek, the word metaphor literally means meaning going forward. So we're actually, that's what's happening, because I can use that metaphor, that Three Billy Goats Gruff, or whatever the story is, and that can help me in a way that if I had to delve into my own personal story, I couldn't do it. I wouldn't be up for that at this time. So it's a fascinating way that you're kind of seeding the conversation with the stories.
We always talk about the stories as being signposts, right? To help along, because we're all on this journey of life, and we don't really understand how it works. You know, it's all an experiment for every single one of us. So the stories are just signposts to help us as we're, like you say, going forward. Oh yeah, this can help me out with this next turn in the road.
In fact, my little starfish, this is my signpost. This is a traditional story, and I wear it around my neck all the time. It's a story that we sometimes tell there, but so it's like the symbols of stories, that we can carry with, and this is just, and so I always tell the patients about the starfish, and how, so it's like we're not saying you need to do this, but we all do this, and we can all hold on to these images and thoughts. Yeah.
I know when I was dealing with elderly relatives and on the verge of not being as kind as I might be, I would go, oh, remember the story of the half a bowl or half a blanket where a son is not being kind to his elderly father and gives him a ratty old blanket. And the son's young son says, well, Dad, take good care of that because I'm going to have to use that on you.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the son goes, oh. So, especially if my son's around, I was, oh, no.
You just kept the blankets all folded and put away.
I'm intrigued by the stories, or the conversation about stories, but I'd really like to hear one of your stories.
Sure.
And if you could grace us with a story, that would be super.
Yeah, sure. We'd be happy to. What would you like to praise us
I think
with?
we should do the heaven and hell story.
Okay, we
because
can
of all
do
the
that.
things we've been talking
Right,
about.
it
It's a lot
fits
of
right
things.
in.
And it's one that we do when we're at the hospital sometimes, and it's
And
one
only
of the first
sometimes,
stories
though.
that we told together, because when we first started telling stories, we thought, well, let's see, what are places that we should start? Do you want to check the tuning on that real quick?
Yeah, I
and then
should
just
do
see
that.
See how everything is, see if you can get through it. And we...
That's a harp that she's playing, right?
This is Jerry's harp
my harp.
that she's had for a number of years now. She has 3 harps so far. Harpists tend to collect harps.
I don't mean
so she
to.
has 3 so far, and there's at least one more in her future. So.
There is, you think?
No, absolutely.
How are we going to do that?
It needs to happen.
Have to wait till after college before we
shall
do
see.
that.
Yes, we have college
Yeah.
expenses to get through first.
Their sons.
Yes, our son's college. Although we are much younger than we look, as Joe said quite
No,
effectively.
we're younger than we look?
No,
I don't know if that was what we...
Oh, no, he said it quite the opposite way, right?
I didn't say that right, did I?
No, he said
Well,
we look much younger than we are, which is,
And you act even younger than that. No.
Well, I certainly do. There's no question about that.
So anyway, as I was saying about this story is when we first started telling stories together, we thought, well, where are we going to start? How are we going to pick the stories? And we thought, well, maybe some of the first stories that we should do are ones that we both know and we both like, because you have to like a story to want to tell it. And this one, we both heard at different points in our life. It's one that I heard when I was living over in Europe for a number of years, and Jerry heard it growing up. Her father used to tell it to her, and so when we realized that we both knew this story, we said, well, it's one that we should probably work with. And it's a story, as we know it, it's a story from China, a story about a monk.
We can't yet.
You can't yet?
Nope.
Having problems there?
Oh, yes.
With the harp?
Yes, we just changed the strings, and they are very dicey.
Well, that string was absolutely fine when I checked it.
Well, it wasn't. Just now it slipped.
Oh,
Okay.
that's why.
It
Okay.
slipped, that's all. I mean, so things are just a little, all right. So
So,
now, all right,
story
so
about
hold
a
on.
monk.
Wait.
Wait, we're not-
I've got to get myself together.
You're getting yourself together now?
Getting myself together. All right.
This is when you work with your
You know
problems.
what? No, yeah, we got problems. Sorry about this, folks.
What were you doing overseas in Europe?
I lived over there for a couple of years. I was doing some schooling over there and working over there in a community with people with learning disabilities and things like that. So I was living in England for a while and in Switzerland for a while, and it was when I was living in and also, really I think. It was before Jerry and I met while I was already on that path to storytelling. So for me, I think really what it was about was just wanting to live in different places and absorb the English language.
You were
harvesting. I was harvesting experience. So really, that's what I was doing.
Wonderful exercise.
Toward the stories. And anyway, so this story is one that I heard while I was over there. So it's good now. Story from China. Story about a monk. And the monk, for his entire life, had been searching for the answer to one question. And the question was, what exactly 100% without a single doubt was the difference between heaven and hell? And now for his whole life he'd been searching for it. He'd done everything he could. He'd read about it, prayed about it, meditated about it, done everything. He'd ask people, he'd say, what do you think is the difference? And they would say, well, I think the difference is blah, 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 blah. And then his next question would be, so when was the last time you were there so that you can prove it to me? Because he wanted to know 100% without a doubt for his entire life. He'd never found the answer. One day he was sitting in his cell in the monastery. He was very old, although he probably looked much younger than he actually was. But he was very old, and he was sitting there thinking about that same question that he'd always thought about. What was the difference between heaven and hell? And he felt a presence behind him in the room with him.
And before turning around, he knew it was no monk. But he was surprised to see who was there. It was an angel, and the angel gazed down upon him and said, for your entire life, you have been searching for the answer to one question. What is the difference between heaven and hell? I've been sent here today to show you. And then the angel turned, and she left the monk's cell.
Well, the monk wasn't going to let this angel get away. This could be the one chance that he had to finally find out the answer. So the monk got up and he ran out of the cell into the hallway. But when he stepped into the hallway, he found that he wasn't in the hallway of the monastery. He was standing at one end of a long, seemingly endless hallway that just disappeared off into the distance. And he could see the angel going further and further and further away down that hall.
And so he wasn't going to let this chance get away. So he followed that angel down that long hall. He didn't know if he was following her for hours, for minutes, or even for days. But finally, she stopped. Time had lost all meaning. And she was at the end of the hall. And she stood before two doors. On one door, there was a sign that said, heaven. And on the other door, there was a sign that said, hell. The angel said, let's look at hell first, and opened the door.
Now, when the door to hell opened, the first thing that the monk noticed was a smell. But it wasn't a bad smell like you might expect. It was actually a fabulous, delicious smell of a stew cooking in a pot. You know how it is when you're in your house and your favorite food is cooking and the smell's all over the house and it just obsesses you. Well, that was what happened to the monk. The smell of the stew swept over him, and he could think about nothing else but sinking his teeth into the stew.
So he looked around that room, and he saw it. It was in a great big pot, cooking over an open fire, and the stew was bubbling out over the top of that pot, and when the stew landed in the fire, it made a sizzling noise, and the smell was all the more pungent. He needed to eat that stew. He was about to step into the room when he saw that there were people in there.
It was packed with people.
And they all looked upset. Every single person in that room looked angry. And he couldn't understand why, with such delicious food to eat, who could be anything but delighted. And then he saw why. He saw that every single person in that room had metal bands around their elbows and long-handled spoons attached to the end of their fingers, so that no matter how many times they dipped their spoons into the stew, they couldn't bend their arms and get that delicious stew into their oh-so-hungry mouths. And the angel said, "This is hell," and shut the door.
Then the angel went over to the door that said heaven and opened that door. And when the door opened to heaven, the first thing that the monk noticed was the same smell. It was the stew cooking in the pot. It swept over him, and he could think about nothing else but sinking his teeth into the stew again.
And so he looked around that room, and he saw the same kind of stew over the same kind of a pot. It was bubbling out over the top. Tss, tss, tss. And there were people sitting around that pot of stew. And every single person in that room also had long-handled spoons tied to their edge of their fingers and metal bands around their elbows. Only in that room, every single person looked happy. Everyone in that room was smiling. And it was only then that the monk saw why. Every single person in that room had learned to dip their spoons into the stew, turn, and feed the stew to each other. And the angel said, "This is heaven," and shut the door.
That's the story.
And your father told that to you, Jerry.
Yes, my father did tell me that story when I was growing up.
And the harp just adds a whole connection to the story and to you two. Just lovely, just lovely.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm a pretty lucky guy. I live with a harp player.
And I'm a pretty lucky girl. I live with a banjo player
And a drummer.
and a bagpipe player.
yeah.
Practicing the bagpipes.
Well,
that was an interesting part of
I
life.
guess I got the better
That's why
part
you
of
have a
that deal.
garage, right?
Yeah,
Get in the garage.
2 acres. Go out, pipe the bounds of the property.
But I loved the way you two were so present in the story, and you would say something, and your face would react. But I wanted, how do you? Okay, so your storytelling. It takes it several different levels higher than mine. Because first of all, you're sharing the story.
Yeah.
And then you're playing the harp while you're telling the story.
Doing more than one thing at a time.
Yeah.
As far as we know, we haven't come across. Well, I guess there's one other storyteller that we know. There's one other storyteller that we know. There are a bunch of other storytellers that we know who play the harp, but there's only one other storyteller we know besides Jerry that can play the harp and tell a story at the
There's
same
two.
time.
I can think of two.
Really?
Odds Botkin can do
He's
it.
the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah, and there's also Robin Williamson can do it.
Yeah.
Oh, he can do it.
Yes, he can. That's
That's right. He does do it. That's
because
right. He does.
okay,
He
the
does
world who is listening to this, Robin Williamson taught me how, and he has no idea that he did this. But like there was a while ago, Robin Williamson. He's a very renowned Scottish singer and storyteller, and he would, for a period of time, he used to come to little old Columbia County and do these performances at this tiny Celtic church. It wasn't so tiny, but a beautiful Celtic church.
Nice place.
And he would be sitting there, and he would tell stories, and he would play the harp. And at this point, I didn't know how to play the harp really, and so I was a new harper, and so I would sit and watch him, and I just didn't look at his face. Like I wouldn't. If I bumped into him on the street, I wouldn't know him. I'd know his harp and his hands. So that's about it. And I watched, and I learned how to do it because of what he did. And so that's how I learned it's not how I learned, but I used him as my model. Because a lot of the other stuff that we do, we don't have any models. Like for our dual telling, the tandem, we organically figured it out our own way. We purposely didn't listen or approach other storytellers who were doing that. We wanted to figure it out our way. But with the harp and all the music, it's mostly our way. But just the trick, there was a couple of things I just wanted to see exactly what he was doing to figure out how he managed to make it happen. And so I got a couple of ideas from watching him. But really, sometimes I talk over like a jig. And don't I sometimes do that? Like I can play a jig.
That's the main thing that you can do is that you can actually play a tune and talk at the same time, which is pretty rare.
Okay, so that wasn't a tune.
That wasn't a real tune. I mean, that was a tune.
She wrote it.
I made it up. It was my tune, but
She was improvising a lot. The trick that she learned from Robin
Well,
Williamson
no,
is that.
actually, I didn't learn this from Robin Williamson. I learned that trick from Robin Williamson. What I learned, this I've just let's see if I can do this and talk over this. This is a jig, and I'm just talking over it. I'm hopefully not talking in rhythm because I haven't done this in a long time. But you see, aren't I just talking over this?
Because if you were talking in rhythm, you'd be singing.
All the time at the strings.
I'm not looking at anything. I'm trying to talk not like if I was talking in rhythm, this would be the way I'd sound. But I'm trying to not do that. I'm trying to talk like a normal person over a jig. Now, only taking a look at this and see how I did is another thing.
You were doing fine. There you go.
But I haven't done that in a long time. But that I don't know. I don't know how a lot of people who do that.
No, you're about the only one that I know that does that.
Can we talk a bit about the music in your repertoire and your stories? Because, I mean, I gather that you were playing the guitar when you were in college, or the band.
Yeah. You know, it's something that we're both musicians and we both like that. So early on, we just decided, well, actually, there's kind of a funny story about that, because when we first got started as the Storycrafters, we decided, okay, one thing that we're going to make part of something that we do is we're going to use a lot of different musical instruments and tell stories. So we gathered up this huge collection of musical instruments, most of which we still have, and they were all around our house. And we did a little photo session where it was us surrounded with these musical instruments, most of which we had no idea how to play.
We didn't even know what they were all called.
We put the pictures on the brochures and we sent them all out, and everybody said, "Oh, this is great, these musical storytellers." So then we had to quickly learn how to play a bunch of them and add them into our stories, and that became part of what we did. So it was a little bit. There's a little bit of a Harold Hill going on there.
Bagpipe in the picture. I got it now.
We put a little bit of Harold Hill in this,
Well,
so,
you gave yourself a deadline.
yeah, we did. In effect, yeah, basically,
And
we
you
said
responded.
we have to get ourselves involved, and I mean, we've made a reality of it. But over the years, we've fine-tuned the ones that we really focused on. So that although we have this huge number of instruments around, most of the stories that we do use a much narrower range of instruments, but that's okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes I remember one performance I saw you do at Riverway Storytelling Festival that you were playing, I thought of a xylophone-like instrument. Mm-hmm. Both of you were playing at the same time from opposite sides.
That's the Ponglong.
That's the Ponglong, yeah.
That's our xylophone from Thailand that we got as a wedding present back when everyone knew that we were trying to collect all these instruments and they were getting us all sorts of bizarre
Somebody
things.
gave you a Pyongyang? Is that what
That's right.
It was a Ponglong from Thailand, and then we integrated that into a couple of different stories. So, yep. And
Wow.
the reason that we both play it is because if you're in the northern Thailand, the way those are traditionally played is in an orchestra. Everybody has one of their own, so you have multiple being played at the same time. So to get the really traditional sound of it, you have to have more than one person playing them. We only have one, so we just sit on either side of it and bang away at it, and it sounds pretty good.
I mean,
I had never heard of a Pyongyang or whatever it was until now, and now I know all about them.
Yeah, well, but my mother and I played duets on a single piano.
Oh, yeah, well-
but I had my part of it, and she had hers, and
Right.
occasionally we dabbled, but you were in integrate, or were you?
Well, there's just fewer keys on the Ponglong, so there's not a lot of places you can go. On the piano, you can. There's a lot of keys, so you can get those four
88
hands
as
going.
I recall.
Right,
Yeah.
but on the Ponglong, we have about 12 or 13 keys to hit, so there's not a long way you can go to get away from each other.
Anyways, okay. I think we need to go.
We need a little break, Kate.
Go ahead.
We need a little break
No,
from the beating of the Pyongyang, I think. And so it's time for coming events, I think.
Yes, indeed. And the Storycrafters have several coming events in July and August in New York State that you can see on the slide in front of you now. Our Greg deftly mixes them in after our taping to do that. So on July 7th at 3:30, they'll be at their local library, the Philmont Public Library.
Which is so much fun to go down the hill
Down the hill.
instead of like 3 hours in the car. It's great.
And then you'll be on July 28th at 7 p.m. You'll be in Groton, New York at their public library.
Yeah.
And in August, you'll be August 3rd at 6:30. You'll be at the Valatia Free Library and Valety. No,
Valety. That's the way you know you're from New York City.
Yeah, that's right. The
Valety.
city people always.
well, just to let the people know that yes, I am seeing that word, but Valatia is the way it's pronounced. And you'll be at the Falcon Ridge Folk Festival in Austerlitz that weekend, August 5th through 7th.
Which is an amazing event.
Amazing event. Yeah, people should know about that.
And then on August 16th, you'll be at the Franklin Free Library in Franklin, New York at 10 a.m. Now, other events happening in the Capital District in July are our Story Circle meeting here at the Colonie Town Library, July 19th. That's a Tuesday at 6:30. For the purpose is to share stories under development or to listen to stories that are under development. We do request that people tell and not read. You could have an outline that you refer to, but this is not a writing group where you're reading and you're not looking at your listeners. Then, I will be on Friday, July 15th, down in Saugerties with Janet Carter at the Inquiring Minds bookstore.
Good venue, great venue.
Yes, and our program is on Remarkable Women.
And there are two remarkable women going to be there that I know.
Oh, boy, do you know which stories you're going to do with that yet? That's it.
No, that's July 15th.
Well, Kate
But-
has a lot of good stories on remarkable women. I happen to know that, so that's a
Yes,
good one.
Barry has produced all of my CDs,
That's right.
and the fifth one I haven't forgotten about that.
Hey, whenever
but,
you're ready.
But the stories are coming together, critical mass. Then a stellar storytelling series in this area.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Is the Not Just for Kids storytelling series over in Schoharie Crossing, which is in Fort Hunter, which is just beyond Amsterdam, New York, not Amsterdam, Holland. And the first teller is our friend Elizabeth Ellis.
Oh,
on
yeah.
July
Oh, is she going to be there?
31st.
Nice.
Oh, that's terrific.
Then Joe Bruchac, Reggie Carpenter, Lynn Ford, Tom Lowry, and ending with Margaret French on September 11th.
Lynn Ford's going to be there?
Yes.
Lynn's
When is she
coming.
gonna be
The
there?
21st.
Oh, goodness.
21st of
August.
August?
Yes.
So Lynn's coming in. Okay.
Yes.
Nice.
So
That's such a great series, and the venue is beautiful. You can
Right.
take a picnic out there and have dinner, and then hear the story. It's a great spot.
Yep.
yes.
Bring a picnic, you know.
Yes, I forgot. Well, Lynn Ford is what I consider one of the national storytellers that goes to a lot of storytelling festivals around the country, as do the Storycrafters. And what was on their list of events in smaller print, because it's not local, is they have one of the 20 weeks,
Something like that.
something like that, in Jonesboro, Tennessee, where the International Storytelling Center is. Their teller in residence program, so they're there for like a week, and they do a performance or more every day. So run right down there. It's really
If you don't mind being in Tennessee in July. Right. Other than that, it's not too bad.
other than that, there's a little.
It's air conditioned in there.
And
is,
it
the
looks
theater.
a lot. It looks a lot like Columbia County. Actually.
Yeah,
That's, you know
it's-
what, Joe? That's so funny that you said that, because the very first time that we went down there, we were invited to the festival, and we drove over, and we'd never been there before, but
Yeah.
as we drove toward Jonesboro, got off the highway, we said, it's just like we're home. It really
looks like Columbia
so much
County.
like the Hudson Valley.
Well,
and
yeah,
Columbia.
I had that whole kind of feeling that it was upstate New York when
Yep.
I was driving there.
Yep.
And then we got to Jonesboro. I was with Kent Bushman, and we got our registration and stuff. And I turned to this sweet woman who was the registrar, and I says, "Now, if two tired, weary travelers wanted a beer and a burger, where would we go?" She says, "I'd go back to Bristol because it's a dry town." And I went, "Oh no!" and I knew I wasn't home.
Okay, moving right along. And if you're not able to go to a live event, or you find television is totally empty of anything you want to watch, you can always go to our YouTube channel. The easiest access is storycircle@proctors.org and click on YouTube. And there are over 170 stories that you can choose from, most of them garnered from this TV show.
And I would also make a request of our viewers. One of the things that we're supportive of is spreading the idea of storytelling. So when you're talking to somebody about these wonderful storytellers you heard on this TV show, please refer your friends to the website, because you can taste storytelling live right there, and it'll spread what the method is, and it would help spread the idea. And we're here to spread the idea of storytelling.
Unfortunately, it's one person at a time, not a revival tent full of people, but we're making a difference, and we hope you'll join us in making a difference in spreading the word about storytelling.
Now you guys have done...
You have a book upcoming.
Well,
You can tell us a little bit. You can give us a little teaser.
We're allowed to give you a teaser.
We're going to give you a teaser. Okay, well, the teaser is, it's almost done. It's like, is it 2.5 weeks from due?
It's a hair's breadth from finish.
Yes, I'm in reference land.
Ready or not, it will be done.
Yes, it's going to be done. In Parkhurst Brothers publishers are going to be putting it out in 2017. And so it's a book, it only has its first name yet. You know how books have the first name and then the little taglines and things. So it only has one name so far. It's the working title, Story Twisting. And the book it's a, what is it? How would you
It's a how-to.
Yeah.
We're hoping that it's going to be sort of the how-to compendium to take traditional stories and twist them in different ways. We haven't given an example, but that's one big thing that we do, is to take traditional stories and then twist them in one way or another, either through wordplay or through changing a character or changing setting, and seeing what happens when we do what Jerry said, twist them in different ways.
Yeah, so people have heard about fractured stories. So it's like it's how to fracture, but not just fracture, but other things too, and a lot of other considerations. It's turned into quite a bit of a a thing. So it's how to. There are example stories and other stuff as well.
The title is Story Twisting.
Yes.
Cool. I love it. We'll wait with bated breath, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm waiting with bated breath too.
That's the best breath to have. I've met some pretty bad baits.
Do you have a twisted tale you want to share as a promo, or?
Sure, we could do one.
Sure. or not.
Yeah, we could do. Should we do a wrap?
Yeah,
or?
we'll do one. Yeah.
Okay, this isn't in the book, but I don't think we're doing the book one. We're not doing a book one right now.
I don't even remember which ones are in the book at the moment.
And you didn't want to talk about the book anyway. So,
Right.
yeah.
But one thing that we're quote unquote known for is doing rap music versions of stories that everybody knows. That's one of the things that we do quite a bit of, and so we'll just do one of those. And the reason this drum, you can't see it because it's below the table, but I will be playing it because that's our rhythm section.
Do you want to give the?
Which one are we doing? Oh, you want to do that one? Okay.
Oh, I don't know.
Right.
Do you want to do that one?
Yeah, we might as well.
Well, I don't know. Or we could do a different one.
How long do we have, Kate? Where are
we
at?
have,
'Cause she can see the clock. We can't see it.
We have 12 minutes, 11 and a half minutes now.
So what do you want to do?
Let's do that one, I guess. Yeah. Okay, so
think?
we have 20 of them, and we're just never sure which one we're going to do. So let's do this one. There's a background for this one to make sense. The thing you need to know.
Do you ever switch stories in the middle of telling them? By the way, I just wanted to do
like in the middle of a story? Hopefully by the time we've started telling the story.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Hopefully, well, that's fine. But hopefully by the time we start a story, we're on the same one. But you see what happens with us is that if you're one storyteller, like when you're standing on the stage by yourself, or Kate, when you're standing on the stage by yourself, you can think in your own mind, no, I'm not going to do this story. I'm going to do this story, and you never say it, and nobody knows you went through that thought process. We have to make sure we're starting the same story.
But your exchange didn't convey any meaningful information.
Right, but you knew we were hemming and hawing in one form or another.
That story. Oh, you want that story?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now we've wasted a minute on that. Okay.
Oh, we didn't mean to.
This is riveting television. So the background to this one is that you've met Jerry and I, and the thing that you don't know about us is, well, we're married, and like any married couple, we have our relationship issues. But since we're on stage a lot, sometimes we'll explore them on stage. And one of our big relationship issues, one of our major relationship issues, has to do with the fact that Jerry was born and raised on Long Island, and I was born and raised in New Jersey. Now, I don't know if anybody out there knows what that means, but there's this incredible rivalry between Long Island and New Jersey. Basically, for people from Long Island, New Jersey is just the worst place in the world, and people from New Jersey like myself, we know the truth, and that's really the way this all works. So actually, there's a funny story about what happened, because we were talking about this on stage at a festival. In fact, at the Falcon Ridge Festival once. And after we were done with our set on the stage, we were just walking around the festival, and a guy came up to us, and he told us a joke, which was the prime example of exactly what we're talking about. He said, "Why are all the people from New York City depressed?" And we said, "All right, why?" And he said, "Because the light at the end of the tunnel
is New Jersey."
Exactly. New Jersey. Or it could just as well be Long Island. See? So,
No, it couldn't.
All right, there it is. Okay. So we took this little issue that we've got, and we applied it to a story that everybody knows, and we came up with this rap version of this story. And you started, right?
Well, many years ago and many days since, there was a king and a queen and a bachelor prince.
No crowns on their heads, no purple robes on their backs. This royal family all dressed in black.
They had a family crest.
Not a shield.
Not a hawk.
It was a big apple. They were from New York. The prince was looking for a marital match. He was looking for a honey, a babe, a hot catch.
But his taste in women was shabby.
It was bad.
So his parents wrote out a personal ad. Single handsome prince likes music and talk, travel and nature and moonlit walks. Seeks a woman who likes the same and is no less than an
honest to goodness, genuine princess.
They came from the boroughs, from the island, from the sticks.
The prince was psyched. The place is crawling with chicks.
The palace looked like Times Square on New Year's Eve.
The king said, how will we get the wrong ones to leave?
Genuine princesses are hard to find. They must have hearts of gold and be sharp of mind.
So the family devised a way to screen all the fine, fancy females that made the scene.
The first young woman who was waiting in line said her name was Carmen.
And she looked fine. The prince said, how you doing, Princess Carmen?
She said, didn't you hear me? The name is Carmen.
What, Carmen?
Carmen.
Carmen.
Carmen, how you talk?
Well, he had a little accent. He was from New York.
I'm answering your ad. You see, I must confess, I'm an
honest to goodness, genuine princess. She showed her driver's license,
other forms of ID,
the family pictures,
and the royal castle key.
She pointed out the chauffeur-driven, horse-drawn carriage.
You've seen my credentials. Let's get on with the marriage.
Wait, said the king. First, we must put you to the test. We'll get started in the morning, so go and get some rest.
So the servants brought her to a quaint guest suite, complete with sauna, ab machine, and sushi to eat.
There was a pile of mattresses, 17 deep.
Her nose brushed the ceiling when she went to sleep, but her dreams were sweet. And in the morning she said, yo, king and queen, you know how to make a bed.
He said, how did you sleep?
And she said, the best.
The king said, hit the road, you just failed the test.
The next young woman to have an interview wore diamonds round her neck and sapphires on her shoe. My name is Princess Carla, said this hopeful queen to be.
Hey there, Carla, said the prince.
Carla, said she.
What, Carla?
Carla.
Carla.
She was getting flustered. Carla.
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 Carla who?
Ghostbusters.
Carla, let him call her Carla. Who was she to balk? She would do almost anything to rule
New York.
My daddy is the chairman of a software dynasty. If you're looking for a princess, well, that would be me.
But when that woman saw the bed, her face turned pale.
I can't climb into that. You know, I'll break a nail.
Well, they got her up there somehow, and she went to sleep, and she slept all night. She didn't make a peep.
She had breakfast with the family, bagels with schmear. Oh, New York bagels, I can't wait to live here. Oh, and where'd you get the bed? I mean, it was the best.
The queen said, talk us to the pavement, you just failed the test.
Now, many women came, and they left depressed.
Because every single one of them failed the test.
And then one day, the prince heard a rap at the door.
There was a woman outside he'd never seen before.
She had Julia Roberts' hair and wore retro clothes, a yellow argyle sweater, and a ring in her nose. She had electric polyester green platform shoes.
This was not the kind of woman the royal family would choose.
Can I crash here tonight? It won't be a hassle. I'll just park my sleeping bag in a corner of the castle. I don't need a tour. I've been there. I've done it. I grew up in a palace, and one day I'm gonna run
The
it.
prince said, you can be a princess. I mean, look at your sweater.
Oh, yes, I am. The name is Princess Claretta. To gather the wisdom I need for the throne, I'm traveling the world all alone. I've checked out Brazil, Bali, Brussels, and Boise, but my heart belongs to my home
In Jersey. The prince said, Mom and Dad, I finally met her. I can even say her name. It's Princess Claretta.
But when she climbed into bed, she said, are they playing jokes? Who could sleep in this thing? I mean, what's up with these folks?
Well, the king and queen sat outside of her door, and all night long they heard Claretta snore.
When she joined them in the morning for a breakfast bite, the queen said,
Sounds like you slept pretty good last night.
in my sleeping bag, yeah, but not in that bed. There was a lump as big as King Kong's head. I stayed there a minute. I just couldn't hack it, and I don't need a year of chiropractic.
Well, the king and queen stared, and the prince said, yes, she's an honest-to-goodness, genuine princess.
Then Claretta said, is this how you treat every guest?
And the king told her of that famous test. He said, we put a pea underneath your bed to find a woman who's a princess. From her toes to her head, your royal roots were showing when you felt it in your nest. And you had the brains not to sleep there. Girl, you aced the test.
Well, duh, said Claretta. I'm as sharp as they come. What fairy tale do you think I'm from? Wake up and smell the latte. It's the new millennium.
She checked out the prince, and they had a little talk and decided she would be queen of New York.
They had a baby girl, and she was no less than an
honest-to-goodness, genuine princess. She
who
was
they lived ever ever after in happiness with the honest to goodness genuine princess.
That's it.
Wonderbar.
So that's a rap version of The Princess and the Pea.
yeah.
So that's one of the ways that we take stories and twist them, and you never know what's going to happen when you apply something like that. So the book is just sort of a how-to and little tips for doing it yourself.
Amazing.
So you both have twisted minds?
Well, Jerry writes the raps, and she's really got the more twisted mind of the two of us, I think. But
We knew that. Somehow I knew that.
No.
Well,
When you can tell who's a twist, oh dear.
I would have suspected that from the way, as I saw you as MC for various productions of the Riverway Storytelling Festival, that you tend to compose poetry to introduce the storytellers.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
this
I
is a twisted variation on that.
Yeah.
You know, as a storyteller
And
myself.
you needed a PhD for that? In sociology? No.
Social welfare, yeah, well.
As a storyteller myself, I must say that I knew The Princess and the Pea, and I've heard the story of the Buddha monk, but I've never engaged in them quite the way as when you told them. And you made a comment about being present in the story when you're telling it. And if the storyteller is present in the story, then the listener becomes present in the story. And it makes a big difference in the relationship between the teller and the audience. And sometimes when we talk about storytelling, we say, well, you don't get that connection in a movie or a song necessarily. And that's the difference.
Oh, it sure is.
It's quite extraordinary. And I really felt it today, and I thought I'd comment on it because I just think the line being present in the story is a good reference for what you strive for when you're telling and what you're listening for.
Well, we believe strongly that exactly what you're saying, Joe, is key because we spend a lot of time working in schools, and one of the major things that we do is we work with students, teaching them to tell stories and then getting them to tell them to younger grades in the school. And that's a major focus of it, is to allow yourself to go on, I call it the ride of the story as you tell it, because if you're going on the ride, they can't help but be sucked in on the ride as well. And then all of a sudden you get to the other end of it and you've transported them, because that's one of the things that we do is to transport, and you have to transport yourself for them to be transported as well.
No, it was great. It was great, and I kind of sit in awe of the rap and the drum and the rhythm and the music because I sing a little in my stories, but I don't. I wouldn't call myself musical in the least. So when you have this range of talents, then the smorgasbord of the Storycrafters is a richer table than a lot of other people. I mean, I just kind of sit here and go, wow.
It's just a different table.
It's
what
just
we
a
do.
different table.
It's what we do as compared to what you do and compared to what Kate does. It's just a different table.
I had one other observation on you two guys, and that was when you were talking about how they were talking and weren't using any words. Well, if you practice stories over breakfast, that's what happens. You kind of get handy like that. Because it was really, I mean, obviously they got a different way of relating than a lot of people.
Maybe there was a quirk to the eyebrow. I wasn't sure.
I wasn't sure either.
I was in Sotheby's once as an observer, and I wasn't moving at all, and in an auction house, and I couldn't see where the bids were coming from. But somebody was
But you know how it is with your husband and your wife. There are things that you can say in one word,
Okay.
and they'll know exactly what you're talking about. And people sitting at the next table in the restaurant
But I
would be
didn't
like, "What did they just
I didn't
do?"
hear any words. I heard
didn't hear any
that.
words.
I heard that and this. I
Yep.
didn't. With my husband, it's like suet or
Bird feeder. Yeah, I know when it says bird feeder, I know I have to fill the bird feeder. That's what I know.
Vacuum.
Vacuum. Yeah, you too, huh?
Laundry basket.
Bathrooms.
we have digressed enough so that we have filled our time.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Well, this
we
was fun.
have. So thank you very much.
Oh, it's
for
our
coming and
pleasure.
joining
It
us.
was a
Thank
delight.
you for bringing the present of your stories and of your presence to your stories and to your stories.
Yes, and thank you for joining us, and we hope you
Yes,
come back
thank
the
you.
next time.
Much
Thank
good cheer.
you.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, but I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning